Have you taken even a moment to think about how this relates to Diltz's levels? Yeah. This is a heuristic. It's a heuristic. Well, they're not really levels in the mathematical sense of the word, and they're not really levels in biological sense of the word, and it's a very useful mapping that there's the environment in which we find ourselves, and that in that environment we engage in certain behavior, writing, walking, talking, looking around, shopping. We came, we saw, we shopped. And when we execute those behaviors, or to speak in another kind of language, when we engage in those behaviors, those are the results of, the manifestation of, a part of larger capabilities, such as decision making, such as motivating ourselves. I don't know what your grocery store is like, but where I'm at, they have the new health food stores. And I know they've hired an anthropologist because they're making the aisles narrower, and you're having to lift the product over a little railing in front, and they're stacked higher. And I get in there and I feel like, I'm hunting and gathering. And I turn to my partner and go, no, aisle 6. And we go to aisle 6 and we're hunting and then we're gathering. Yeah? Well, we have the behaviors of taking things off the shelf, running the list, thinking ahead, what do we want to have for dinner next week, and all that. So we have here these capabilities of decision making and of planning and of organizing, motivating, and so forth. And that these, of course, are in some way affected by our values and beliefs. As I mentioned, it's a health food store, the modern health food store, the one that sells wine. And in this modern health food store, you can get just about anything, and yet it's natural, organic, or at least so they're telling me. And in that way, it expresses certain values that I have about how I want to treat my body, certain beliefs about how they treat the chickens that I eat. I'm sorry, I do laugh when I think about it. I want that to be an organically grown chicken. Not that it matters to the chicken now, but we do have expressions of our values and beliefs, and in some way serious. I think in America, we vote more with our money than anything else. Yeah, an expression of what we believe. And that this is related to our sense of who we are, our identity. That we're some people that care about something passionately and express that through our buying habits and the people we hang out with and the causes we contribute to and what we talk to other people about, what we consume. And all of that connected to some larger scope that Robert respectfully named spirit, in the sense of not trying to define it either as a person or an energy, but leaving that open in the sense of a connectedness, a higher informing. Who else is it that's affecting and participating with us in this world? And I'd like to propose a slightly different understanding of this. You're all aware of the idea of an environment. We're in an environment here, aren't we? This room, a little bit of noise outside, kind of soft light inside. You realize the only way you can know about this environment is through your senses? That if you couldn't see it and hear it and sense it, you wouldn't know what environment you were in. So there's a sense in which environment isn't so much the environment you're in, but the modalities. What the frog's eye teaches the frog's brain. The idea that you walk into an environment, you go, big soft couches. This is a good environment. Or you go, oh, it's nice and airy. This is a good environment. we pick out certain aspects of the environment, modalities and submodalities of the environment that we consider important. How many of you notice what makes something attractive for you on the modality level? You ever seen the little rodents, the certain kinds of small, long-tailed mice? And if they see something, ooh, shiny, and they'll take it and they'll pull it back to their nest. And you get in, they got bells and bits of tinsel and stuff. Guys, you ever wonder why women wear sequin dresses? Ooh, shiny. Or why new cars are buffed to the point of being a mirror? Ooh, shiny. That shininess is a submodality that we respond to. And I would ask you to consider, does it make any difference if the picture's inside your head and you make it bright and shiny, or if it's outside and it's bright and shiny? You probably find both of those attractive, unless, of course, you lean more into color. You know, and you look in that interior of that new car and you go, I like that color. Or you're just walking down the street and there's a gallery and there's this splash of color and you just stopped. Or the traditional primate activity of watching sunsets. I'm sure there are people who watch sunrises, I'm just not one of them. And if you imagine that sunset inside, it also affects you, doesn't it? So what I'm suggesting here is that there's a correspondence between the submodalities, the modalities, and the environment, because our modalities are our environment. That's the only way we get a mark on the map. It's the only way we know our environment. The modalities and the submodalities. Did you hear that bell just now? Little ding. Did Pavlov ring a bell? No, his assistants rang the bell. Do you know, these days, professor begins to talk about Pavlov, all the students start to salivate. Okay? Gee, it's really difficult to get an anchor to take, isn't it? Now, this time I won't even do it. Ding! Okay. If you're not seeing it exactly here, just set up a very nice, and thank you for playing, little loop between. Now she's going. All right. And that's an anchor. A behavior, an anchored sequence, stimulus, response in an environment. The only way that I can make the anchor is with the modalities and submodalities, the tinkling sound, the shape of the little hitter here and of the little chime. So the only way that she can respond to it, the only you can respond to it, is by actually seeing it. Come on, you don't even have to see it here. See, it works even when Jen. Of course it is. I cheat. The thing is that whether it's the look on my face, which you need to use the visual modality to find, and the submodalities to sort, or whether it's the chime or both, that those create a stimulus response where I can turn to you and I can say, don't think of that face I made. Okay. And what do we call this in our field called NLP? Anchoring. There is a rapport there, certainly. We call this anchoring. And so I'm beginning to suggest that our environment is made up of the modalities and submodalities. Within that environment, whether it's the actual rooms we're in or the rooms and places of our imagination, which are often more important in shaping the world, that we have anchoring taking place between the outside and the inside, within ourselves, and we put anchors together and we take them apart. All the different anchoring formats that you've learned. And if you were to take a number of these anchors and were to add them up so that you've got what you see and what you hear and going to your feeling, a little laughter, a slight smile, that we begin to build up into what we would call a strategy. With this difference. There's no direct purpose in an anchored sequence. There's no intention. That's at the level of the strategy. A strategy is a sequence of representations, internal and external, leading to an outcome. A sequence, external and internal representations, leading to an outcome. So a strategy has outcomes and sequences. Now, what are those sequences made of? Anchoring, modalities. You're both right. They're made out of the modalities that are anchored together to form the sequence that leads to the outcome. You see how this is building up? Yeah. Now, as Robert noted, which of these strategies you're going to engage is going to depend on your values and beliefs. Now, we're not building up anymore, we're constraining. We're encapsulating. We're saying that someone says, well, yeah, I know how to cheat. I know how to beat the system. And I have values and beliefs about myself and how I want to represent myself to my children, that I don't engage in those. And yet, if it came to where the children needed to be fed, that belief might change. Depends on conditions. Person says, I'm not that kind of person, might never engage in the strategies of being creative, simply for a belief they picked up sometime earlier in life. A generalization about themselves that inhibits trying out creativity, trying out new things. It affects your choice of strategy. Now, if we were to put this in terms that are in NLP, we would say that we're talking about parts, or we're talking about frames. Of course, we're talking about reframing. A party, your creative part, your tenacious part, your I can find a way kind of part. The part of you that already knows the answer and just hasn't told you yet. Now, are there parts? There are if you think there are, right? Yeah. Are there strategies? There are if you think there are. Is this solipsism? No. Solipsism. Are we just making it up? No, because our model, remember, has correspondence to actual neurolinguistic behavior. We watch the eye movements. We hear the language. Watch a person when they discuss their strategy. We say, Look at this evidence. By the eye movements, by saying, I'm going to do that to get there. We can go, see, we have evidence for this. Just like we have evidence for an anchor. And as far as parts, no. No, you have parts. I have a suit. I have a mic. I have a part. I have a belief. You want to see them again? There's nothing there. But if I have a part of me, then my identity is above that part. I have it. Again, the language is your guide. Also, by the way, I'm treating it as an object, right? I'm not saying I relate to my part. I'm saying I have a part. I have a belief. Belief is a generalization you made about the world. Whether it was superego was impressed upon you at some point in time, or whether you didn't go out enough and you got the idea that you couldn't go out and then you stay home, or whatever it is. We get ideas about ourselves. We get a belief. So I say I have a belief that I'm not good at sports, something like that. And not because of anything else, but that I never really got out, and now it becomes, but it's a belief, it's untested. And I have the belief. So the idea is identity is superordinate to the values and beliefs that you have. I mean, since you were little and went to school, became a teenager, and did or didn't rebel, and you got to be an adult, and you're kind of, have you changed your mind about anything? I always hate to do this one because it's just devastating when I find out that somebody still believes in Santa Claus. And they said, what do you mean believes in Santa Claus? But at some point, you tweak to the idea, ask mom and dad. And be nice to mom. This will help. Santa will be more beneficent. So we changed a belief. And yet we feel kind of the same. Our identity very much can take in all of this. What is an identity? Identity has these peculiar qualities of equivalence, as in I am something. We take two very different things and we act as if they're the same. Well, that's the thing. When people say I'm a schmuck, or somebody said he's a jerk, or somebody says other pejorative things, people don't think of them as metaphors. But if you step just a little further out and you go, she's a real hero or heroine. That was incredible what she did. And you step just a little further out and say to somebody, it's like, well, you're my family. You're like my God, my godmother, or you're like the magic fairy. So you do something to somebody, and suddenly it gets to be, you recognize it as metaphoric. So yeah, I would definitely say metaphor, because metaphor makes an identity between the two. So we can begin to see that each of these different models of NLP corresponds to one of the categories that Robert has offered us. Perhaps exactly, perhaps somewhat roughly, and yet as a way of seeing that there are differences. That in an environment, anchoring occurs, which can be built up and utilized in sequences to create capabilities, which are constrained by the values and beliefs, the parts we have, which are surrounded, if you will, by an identity, which also constrains. After all, what you believe about yourself, you know the old Henry Ford line, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Yeah. And we get a sense of that here. That if we think we can, if we have senses of capacity, then we try out different behaviors. We see if we can make it work. So where do the meta programs go? What's that? They affect everything, Jim says, and Jim is right. Can you tell me how they affect everything? Take a moment. Yeah?
Well, in some ways, they're probably the most basic structure of any of those there. Those, it seems to me they're foundational to all of those things. So they're operational within all of those.
And
if you change your meta program, it can affect all of those.
I left the chairs up here for a purpose. You see the similarity, you see the difference. It's in the external environment. And then I would claim that your bias, your leaning to notice the sameness before the difference or the difference before the sameness is, one more here. I lost it. That your tendency to see the sameness or the difference first is because you already have developed a bias in terms of matching, mismatching, which you tend to go out and apply to the world. That you have a leaning, a development, going back to that pie shape, that you spend more time noticing what's different. You go into a situation and go, what's different? For many, many years, people that were attracted to NLP were attracted to it because it was different. Oh, not now. Now they want new and improved. That's what happens as products go through the product cycle. You get that whole product cycle of the early adopters, new, and it's really different. And then it's got to be somewhat different, but made by a reliable company, right? We don't want music things made by Apple. We want them made by some reliable company like Microsoft. And so we go from there to, and then a lot of companies start, and then it becomes the whole middle ground, right? This is like you can go to the shop, yeah, well, there's that version, okay. And then what do they do? Revive it, go, now new and improved in multiple colors. They re-excite us. But eventually, it's the same old, same old. David Gordon tells the story about walking up and seeing a shirt and going, that's a cool shirt. And these guys in San Francisco, could give you an idea of who the guys are. These guys walk by and they go, ooh, are they still making those? David kind of put it down. So each of us is already awakening on a train of thought and action. And as we awaken to becoming a person, we already have leanings based on our personal history, based on our neurology that we were given, other factors as well. And we pay attention to our environment in different ways. And that paying attention, whether it's the difference here or the brightness or the people in the room, starts on the modality level. And then, of course, what are we going to do? We're going to organize our behaviors to respond to shiny or colorful. We get that stimulus response. And the other attractors and repellers that we have and the other anchors that we have, and those build up into strategies, the strategies of which are going to be biased by our meta programs. That if we're people-oriented, we'll have lots of strategies for people. And we'll know a lot of ways to negotiate with them and talk to them and include them and enjoy them. And then we've got things. And your things, things, drive an old car. Why ever wash a car? It just takes time. Talk to Steve about this one. Not important. Not important. No strategies developed there. And moving up, the values and beliefs we have can be influenced by such a simple and basic environmental difference as I like to have different experiences. You get the belief difference is good. You get the idea, let's look to the future. The future is where the solutions are. Yeah, the past, that's so 5 minutes ago. Passé. And even this sense of identity then can be influenced by the mixture, by the arrangement, by the relative balance or imbalance of the various meta-programs. They thread. And the meta-programs thread from the bottom all the way up. And spirit, I don't speak of that for a couple reasons. One, I think it's very personal. And another is, who knows that there isn't a place beyond making distinctions and differences, a source from which we draw creativity, a place from which all things are possible. As Wittgenstein, the philosopher, said, that which we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. And yet in that silence, I want to respect whatever that means for you. My purpose in being here is to connect the threads, the whoop and the warp, the making of a carpet that can take us to new places. We'll take a break. Thanks.